Hi, welcome. In today's episode, I'll be exploring the evolution of the Beatles' music from their early days with this to this.
Oh, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be.
Now, the Beatles released 13 official studio albums during this whole period. Please Please Me, With the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Magical Mystery Tour, The Beatles, also known as The White Album, Yellow Submarine, Abbey Road and Let It Be. As we know, the Beatles were an incredibly influential and prolific band, and their music still resonates with audiences today, old and new. So don't click off just yet. Stick with me on this musical voyage of discovery and perhaps even a little enlightenment. The early years. The Beatles' musical journey began in the early 60s with infectious, melodious and understandably youthful exuberance. Love Me Do was their first single, which introduced the world to their signature harmonies and catchy hooks. So over the next few years, their composing skills became finely honed, and with a grueling touring schedule mapped out by Brian Epstein, you'd think that that would impact their writing output, but actually the opposite is true. Touring had a profound influence on the Beatles' early songwriting output. It provided them with performance experience. Playing night after night in various venues helped them develop a tight musical consistency and stage presence. Now, this experience helped them understand what worked well in front of an audience, enabling them to write songs that would engage and entertain their fans. They expanded their musical repertoire by playing lengthy sets that required a vast repertoire of songs which would encourage them to explore different musical styles and genres. So playing covers of popular songs from various artists helped them understand song structure, chord progression, and harmonies. The exposure to a wide range of music inspired their compositions and influenced their songwriting techniques. Their performances in Hamburg often required them to adapt their songs to suit a lively and energetic atmosphere of those venues. So they learned to captivate their audiences by injecting more energy into their performances and modifying their arrangements. And these adaptations would influence the way that they approached songwriting, pushing them to create catchy melodies, dynamic arrangements, and memorable hooks, and increased their output of original songs. So the intense touring schedule with multiple sets a day provided the Beatles with ample opportunities to test their original compositions while on stage. And the constant performance and audience feedback allowed them to gauge the impact of their own songs in real time. And the experience of seeing how the songs resonated with the audiences helped them refine their writing and developed a deeper understanding of what would work and what wouldn't. And finally, the close quarters and extended time spent together during tours fostered a collaborative environment among the Beatles, especially John and Paul. They consistently shared ideas, experimented with new sounds and techniques, and pushed the boundaries of their songwriting. The creative energy that emerged from their interactions on the road helped them innovate and evolve their musical style. Having now broken into the mainstream as an officially contracted band and not just a jobbing, beer money earning band, they gained popularity and their music quickly evolved. Songs like She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand showcased their energetic pop sound and established their position as the leaders of the British invasion. Exploring new sounds. With each passing album, the Beatles' music became more sophisticated and adventurous. Albums like A Hard Day's Night and Help showcased their evolving songwriting style and increased maturity. Now, it was during this time that the Beatles began to experiment with new sounds and genres. Their music started incorporating elements of folk, country, and even Indian classical music. Now, folk music had a profound impact on the Beatles' songwriting, particularly during their mid-career phase. Norwegian Wood from the Rubber Soul album featured elements of folk employing acoustic guitars and introspective lyrics. The Beatles' interaction with the growing folk music scene in the 60s, particularly in the United States, influenced their approach to storytelling and the use of acoustic instruments. And then there was country and western, both kinds, right?
What kind of music do you usually have here?
Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and western.
Country music also found a way into the Beatles' musical repertoire. Inspired by artists like Buck Owens and Carl Perkins, they incorporated country-style guitar picking, twanging melodies, and vocal harmonies into songs like What Goes On and I've Just Seen a Face and even Rocky Raccoon. This fusion of country elements with their own pop sensibilities created a unique blend and further expanded their musical palette. One of the most influential and groundbreaking explorations for the Beatles was their incorporation of Indian classical music, which was of course largely influenced by George Harrison's deep interest in Eastern spirituality and his association with the sitar virtuoso Ravi Shankar. Now, George's fascination with the sitar led to its inclusion on such songs as Norwegian Wood and most prominently on his own composition Within You Without You. The band embraced Indian instruments such as the sitar, the tabla and tambura, as well as the intricate melodic structures and rhythmic patterns found in Indian classical music. But their experimentation with the genres was not limited to just imitation. They would skillfully blend the influences they'd picked up into their own songwriting style, creating a unique and innovative sound. This willingness to incorporate these diverse musical elements contributed to the richness and depth of their compositions, pushing the boundaries of popular music and captivating audiences worldwide. So by incorporating elements of folk, country and Indian classical music into their songwriting, the Beatles expanded the sonic landscape of popular music and demonstrated their versatility as musicians. Their exploration of these genres not only showcased their artistic growth, but also influenced countless musicians and bands that followed in their footsteps. Now, I think for me, the most diverse inclusion of different genres goes to McCartney for his consistent leanings to Old English theatrical music such as vaudeville, as well as his inclusion of brass instruments, making many of his songs sound like, old Salvation Army bands, Penny Lane, Martha My Dear, those sort of tunes. He really did push those genres and boundaries. The lads didn't like it, did they? Maxwell Silverhammer, ding, ding, ding. Pushing the boundaries. The mid-1960s marked a turning point for the Beatles. With albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver, they started pushing the boundaries of popular music. Their music would become more introspective though, and their songwriting delved into deeper themes. Tracks like In My Life and Eleanor Rigby would showcase their lyrical depth and introduce innovative recording techniques. The Beatles were pioneers in the realms of recording techniques, consistently pushing the boundaries of what could be achieved in the studio. Their innovative approach to recording revolutionised popular music and laid the foundation for many techniques that are still widely used today, such as recording multiple instruments and vocal tracks separately and then layering them together during mixing, allowing for more complex arrangements and rich harmonies. Another groundbreaking technique employed by the Beatles was the use of tape manipulation and effects. To achieve their unique sound and textures, they utilised techniques like tape loops, vari-speed, which is changing the playback speed of recording, and artificial double tracking, which is creating a simulated double of a vocal or instrument. An iconic example of this is the tape loop used in the song Tomorrow Never Knows from Revolver. Which created that outer-worldly atmosphere. Sgt. Pepper's and beyond. In 1967, the Beatles released their groundbreaking album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which revolutionised the concept of a studio album. Now, I've never really considered the album as a concept album, and actually neither did John.
It's called the first concept album. It doesn't go anywhere. Mr. Kite, all my contributions have absolutely nothing to do with this idea of Sgt. Pepper and his band. But it works, because we said it worked, and that's how it appeared. But it was not as put together as Pet Sounds, and it doesn't have a concept. It starts out with Sgt. Pepper and introduces Billy Shears, and that's the end, apart from the so-called reprise. Otherwise, every other song could have been on any other album. Mr. Kite could have gone anywhere, Lucy could have gone anywhere, A Day in the Life could have gone anywhere.
I wonder if it's just the musical historians who coined the phrase. Perhaps it was the idea of an alter ego band led by Billy Shears. Musically, though, the album displayed their creativity and experimental spirit. The Beatles incorporated orchestral arrangements, psychedelic sounds, and even unconventional instrumentation, as heard in the tracks like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Day in the Life. On Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, they created a vivid and immersive musical experience by incorporating instruments and techniques, like the mellotron, the early keyboard instrument that produced pre-recorded sounds, pretty much like the forerunner of a sampler, only the mellotron used analog tape instead of digital sound. The Beatles used the mellotron to create the mesmerizing flute-like intro that sets the dreamy tone for that song. Now, tape loops that create the swirling and cascading effects by splicing together sections of tape and then running them through the recording equipment, producing an otherworldly and psychedelic sound. Towards the end of the song, there are sections where John Lennon's vocals are recorded and then played backwards, and this technique adds an eerie and surreal quality to the track. They also incorporated vari-speed on some vocal tracks, creating a higher or lower pitch, adding to the trippy vibe of the song. And I've kind of always thought that some of the later John Lennon songs really utilised the vari-speed because his vocal pitch seems a bit higher to me.
Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world.
Individual artistic voices. By the late 60s, the Beatles began to reflect their individual artistic voices. The White Album would also further showcase the diverse songwriting skills and styles of each band member. The White Album was also a pivotal point for George Harrison's career, where his songwriting skills, musical experimentation, and independent creative voice flourished. The album provided a platform for him to showcase his talents, and his contributions helped shape the artistic landscape of one of the most iconic albums in musical history. During the recording sessions for the album, George's talent and artistic voice truly began to shine, and he emerged as a formidable presence within the band. Even Ringo managed to get in on the writing game. Whilst he has a handful of joint songwriting credits with the Beatles, the first one he wrote and recorded for the group, as a solo author is Don't Pass Me By. The final chapter. Their final studio album, Abbey Road, 1969, demonstrated a return to a more cohesive sound. It featured intricate vocal harmonies, innovative song structures, and memorable melodies. The album showcased their abilities to seamlessly blend diverse genres while maintaining a distinct Beatles sound. As their journey neared its end, they released Let It Be in 1970, and it captured a raw and heartfelt sound, as well as capturing the band's raw energy and spontaneity. The album was supposed to reflect a return to their earlier roots, with a focus on simple and heartfelt compositions, as well as an attempt to record without adding edits and overdubs. With only 4 of them initially playing on the album, they were restricted to 2 guitars, a bass and drums. Or with Paul on piano, George and John would play the Fender 6-string bass. In fact, George Harrison's song For You Blue has no bass on it at all. Of course, once Billy Preston arrived, the addition of his keyboard skills meant they could still capture a raw sound without having to overdub keyboards. See Billy Preston video up here. Let It Be originally had George Martin at the production helm, but was later taken over by Phil Spector.
And then the final snub was that EMI said, well, we wouldn't have my name on the album, because Phil Spector had now produced it. And I said, well, look, let's have a compromise. Why don't you say, produced by George Martin, overproduced by Phil Spector?
Conclusion. I feel that the evolution of the Beatles' music from Love Me Do to Let It Be is a testament to their artistic growth and their innovation. They transitioned from a young and energetic rock and roll band to groundbreaking pioneers of studio experimentation. And they pushed the boundaries of popular music, and they left an indelible mark on musical history. Talk about reinventing yourself, right? The Beatles did just that. From beginning to end, they changed it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little video and might consider a cheeky little subscribe or like, and maybe even a share to help push the channel out to a wider audience. Thanks for watching and bearing with. I'll be back in another video soon. Bye for now.